Dave Parody of ThinkOutsideTheSlide.com here. In this video I want to show you a different way to deal with category labels when you have a lot of text in them. So this is an example here where this data set is drawn from another example that Stephanie Evergreen showed in an article that she wrote on her blog. But these labels here of each of these organizations are very long, and we have the percentages here. So if we use a column graph, this is what we see too often, where long data labels, Excel automatically rotates them 45 degrees and will chop them off if they're too long. So one of the choices that people make, and it's one that I always recommend in my workshops, is scroll down here to use a bar chart instead. So a bar chart gives you more space for your labels here on the left hand side. But the challenge can sometimes be, if you have really long labels as we do here, it even chops some of those off. So I want to show you another technique that you might want to consider that works in the latest versions of Excel, which can replace the default category labels by using data labels. So I'll go to my next sheet here. And what I've done is I've set up a data table that has two extra data series. So the first data series that I have here is called label space, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a data series that will contain the category name. So it's not part of the axis, but it's actually a data label. It gives us a little more functionality and flexibility. Then I have my values, and then I have those values again. The reason being that we're going to use a chart type called a stacked bar chart. Stacked bar charts do not allow labels to be outside of the segment that they are related to, which makes sense because they need to be in the segment that they actually are related to. So in this case, what I've done is I've created another segment to hold that label. So this is what the finished graph is going to look like. So let me walk through how we create this. I'm going to select my data here. I'm going to say insert, and the chart I'm going to select is the regular 2D stacked bar chart. So the stacked, not the 100% stacked. So select that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this down so that we have some more space to work on it over here. So you'll notice that I have a bit of a problem here. The blue segment of this bar runs right over the category names, which is fine because I'm going to get rid of the category name. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my skittle here and say I want to format the axes. And by default it selects your horizontal, so I'm going to click on the vertical axis. I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to select in the labels section. I'm going to say label position, and I'm going to select none. So what that does is it removes the labels, so we need that. On bar charts, one of the other things we always have to do is to flip the categories. So I'll use this checkbox to categories in reverse order. So I've now gotten rid of those labels, but I have to add them back in, but I'm going to add them in the space that this particular blue segment takes up. Now, the size of that blue segment, I set it to minus 30%. It's a negative value, so it goes to the left of the axis line. How long you need will depend on how much text you have in your label. So you kind of have to experiment with that a bit. I found minus 30% was going to work for mine. You might have to experiment with yours. So I'm going to select the segments. First thing I'm going to do is going to make all these bars wider. So I'll set the gap width to 40%. That makes them wider. Now for this particular segment, what I need to do is I need to set it to be invisible, so no fill color, and then add the data labels. So on the Chart Tools Format ribbon, I'll set the Shape Fill to No Fill, and then I will add data labels. So I'm going to add data labels, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to More Options, because what I need to do is in the label options, I need to select what data should be in that label. So I'm going to add the category name, and I'm going to remove the value. So that gives me the category names in that segment, that blue segment. And the position I'm going to use is called inside N. So it puts it right beside the bars. Now you look at that and you go, Dave, that looks awful. They're all on top of each other. That's because by default, data labels word wrap. And you would think that they would take up the entire segment that it could, but it doesn't. It picks some, again, I'm not sure exactly how it picks this, but it picks some width and then wraps them. The nice thing is in the latest versions of Excel, when you go to the alignment in the size and properties, you go to alignment, you can uncheck this checkbox here, wrap text in shape. So when I uncheck it, now it makes each of those labels a single line. And because you determine how long that segment is, how big that segment is in terms of the negative value, you can make sure it's big enough so that your longest label fits in. So that deals with the labels. I'm going to get rid of the grid lines because we don't need those. So we'll just uncheck the grid lines box here. And now let me deal with the labels outside of the orange segment. So outside of the orange segments, I want the label. That's why I had this third data series. So this third data series, the label value, I'm going to set that fill color again to no fill. And I'm going to add data labels here. And I'm going to add them to a position, we go to the positioning here, called inside base. So inside base puts it at the start of where the segment would be, which in this case is outside the segment I actually want to show. So I've added these labels to simulate what a typical bar chart would have, which is the ability to place the label outside the end of the bar. Because I have this segment that's now invisible, the graph data, the horizontal axis here goes up to 20%. It doesn't really need to go that far. Now my data doesn't really have a lot of white space on the right hand side here, but if it does, if your data is going to leave you with this huge amount of white space on the right hand side, you can format the horizontal axis and you can change what the maximum is. So I could change the maximum, let's say, to 0.15 here, and it gives me a little less white space on the right hand side. So just know that you can adjust that if you need to. So now I've got my graph formatted the way I want. I can actually get rid of the horizontal axis because it really is not needed anymore. So I'll get rid of the horizontal axis. I can also get rid of the chart title by just unchecking that, and get rid of the legend by unchecking that. If I need to, or if I want to, I could change the segment that is shown, the bar that is shown, to have the fill color of the first data series color in your colors for your theme. Now I have a graph that I control the length of space that the text will take up for the category labels. I don't allow Excel to control that. And this way, I have more control over my graph. I can get exactly the graph I want, positioning the labels both to the left and the right of the bars that I want. So when you have a lot of text in category label, consider whether this technique of adding category labels through a data label and an invisible segment on a stacked bar chart might work for the situation you need. This can be an advantage when you have a limited space for your graph and you have to stick to standard corporate or organizational fonts. Some people have suggested, Stephanie in her article suggested, well, just change all the fonts to a condensed font, maybe Arial, Narrow, or something like that, which if you have flexibility, that's possible, but when you don't have flexibility of changing the font, this technique allows you to make sure you have enough space for your labels.